Here's an image. Again, in this one, this is a case where, the boy's face has some subtleties in it, but the reason you can read that is because the material in the background is monotonous. If something is monotonous, then it'll sit on a flat plane. And it doesn't necessarily call all your attention. If there was a lot of breakup, if these shapes are big and small, and it would really compete more for attention. Here's a little scene in this image. Most of the shapes and marks in this image are rectangles. Okay. I'll do these kind of small as we kind of roll through these. Overall we have this, but then we have an area that is pretty much like this, and we have an area going up like this. Okay. A couple linear shapes, little kind of towers up here. But the predominant things are, all of this is rectangles. So when we talk about shapes, we can talk about shapes like we talk about values. We can talk about a major key and a minor key, right? So most of the shapes in this image are rectangles. And these rectangles are all clustered in this zone, right? All the way up. So we could say that the major key of this image in terms of shape is rectangles, right? And then they break open and create little passages down here. Okay. But right in here, we have a doorway with an arch. And so you can see how dominant this becomes when, I can darken some of these rectangles, but even if I darken the rectangles, that arch is still going to stand out strong because of the difference of shape. So this is like major key. Of shape. With rectangles. Okay? And the variations on that are these very tall rectangles. Right? But the greater contrast is the arch here, the arch at the top. Now the arch at the top has a lot of saturation and a lot of variety of hue up in here too. That's why you go up there. And then there's two smaller ones up there like that. Okay? And these are the things that really draw your eye. This becomes a texture that has a movement to it. Then there's some lines that start to come in here, and these lines are strong directional lines, you see? So that's kind of the makeup of this composition. We're seeing that its major key is rectangles. Its most extreme from the rectangles are the domes, these semicircles here, like that. And then we have these directional lines that work like this. The comment really is, would these arcs stand out as much if they didn't have high tonal contrast or contrast of color? And it's true. When you add, if we look at it, we're going to say we have a contrasting shape. We also have a contrast in value, and we have a contrast of color up here. Anytime you multiply your visual components, it's compounding the impact. Okay? And that's why it's important to recognize your visual components, because once you can separate them, then you can start layering them. And to understand how to break them apart and then layer them, you can have multiple arches in here. but and that would dilute the dominance of the rectangles. But if only a couple of them had really strong contrast or really strong color contrast, those would become the dominant ones. So it's always building through your major and minor key some sense of dominance and subordination. The question is how do conflicting visual components read in an image? Okay, if your visual components are conflicting, they can actually dilute the impact, mislead the impact, mislead your story, or misdirect you. But maybe that's what you want. Maybe you want to build a subtext into your story. So if you're going to build a subtext into your story, you may just create these types of conflicts that actually give the viewer pause and question these things. Amazingly enough, the audience is visually literate enough. We don't know, and they don't know how to break down these components, but they know when they're impacted by them. And I first learned that, to my surprise, when I was trying to break down a style for a movie. And I was inventing a style of drawing, and so it wasn't natural to me. I was trying to combine a couple different looks. And what I did was I took this concept of line, mass, and form, and then I took a whole bunch of images and of different art periods and different illustrations and paintings and so on. I made a stack of artwork. And then what I did is I had about 5 or 6 images that I was trying to create this look. About 4 of them worked. I didn't know why. 4 of the drawings seemed to have a certain quality to them that made them look similar, starting to lean into a particular style. Okay. The other 2 were a little bit off, and I wasn't quite sure why or how they were off. So, and I was kind of trying to go into new territory, so I didn't know how to answer that, myself. So what I did was I took those drawings, and then I took this stack of drawings, and I gave them all to my wife, who is not an artist. Okay, she's not an artist. We never talked about breaking any of this stuff down or anything like this. And I said, here's an idea. Do you understand the idea of line and mass and form and the groupings that you could do? So she said, yeah, and I put some cards down, 3x5 cards that said line and line over mass, line over shadow, form over mass, form over line. And I put these categories, and I say, can you categorize the artwork? She did it like she's just shuffling a deck of cards. She knew exactly what category to put them in. Once we're clear on how to break something down, we can all break it down. And that was amazing to me. It's like, wow, I thought she would stumble over this a little bit, but no, she nailed it. And I've done this with other people after that. And even as groups, you get a bunch of artists together and nobody's going to agree, right? But the fact is I could take a whole room of artists and point out these components and say, what category do they fit in? And they'll all unanimously point at where they go. Now, if the image is confusing, misleading, or those components aren't clear, I needed a discard pile. Something where images don't fit the bill. And those were the images that were pretty lousy. Okay? So, and it's amazing how that happens. If your components and if your arrangement is not clear or conflicting, we dismiss the image. Okay? But we will, if we look at these things, we will recognize these components. Most people can't label them. But us as graphic designers and artists, we need to understand the tools that make up our images. And when we understand those tools, we can create images that have more of an impact. As far as the 6 images that I put in that I was trying to create some continuity, 4 of those images that I felt were on track ended up in one pile. The others ended up in other piles. Okay? And when they ended up in other piles, I saw what category she put them in. I was able to readjust the bias and put it in the right pile. What it was doing, it was basically breaking down the structure. I mean, look at it. It's kind of like our DNA. We didn't know we had DNA for a long time, and then we go, oh, wait a minute, these little things, they make up these patterns. Oh my gosh, we have these little things with patterns in us now, and that's what people do. People tend to look for patterns. So we find these patterns, based on 4 chemicals or whatever, right? And then we start to break those down and realize, oh, these affect this, these affect that, and these affect that. Now we can look at our DNA and basically break down all kinds of structures. And our DNA, based on these 4 little components, now all of a sudden we can create so much vast, information, just like the computer too. You take lines and circles. Who would think that you'd be able to break down photographs and letters and writing and all kinds of stuff into just these simple little components? The question is, do I think that old masters in the past have tapped into this and used this? Absolutely. They've absolutely. And these are things that have kind of come and gone through history. And the thing is, a lot of times when we work part non-verbally. When we work, when we're creating artwork, we're working non-verbally, right? Part of the time in this creative gas. Some people call it a flow, okay? But you're working and drawing, and you're sensing things and putting things together. Now your brain feels like it's in overdrive, but you could be doing some mass calculation during that time. That could be critical time when you're actually putting things together from what you remember, from what you know, and all those things kind of come together and they just spill out. They feel like they just spill out. Then you're going to have to go back every once in a while and check and correct, and check and correct. Go into that kind of gas state and draw inspirationally, and then go back and check. There's a level of analysis that goes along with that type of flow or that type of intuitive working. Now, people that have learned a lot about what they do or observed deeply and recall those observations deeply, they can tend to do some of this and not think about these parts. And some artists, though they might not know how to articulate or break things down, they just do things a certain way, okay? And some artists are that way. And I mean, we found if we were looking at doing a movie that has, say that we find an artist that we like their style and we bring them in the studio and we want to kind of tap into that style. We found that a number of them can't describe what they do. They do it intuitively. They do it because they've landed on things that feel to them that they work, and they do work. Well, they're tapping into these components, okay? And whether they did it consciously or analytically doesn't matter. They're putting these things together, and they're basically creating the structure that's making clear images that we respond to. And so, yeah, I believe that these things have always been there and always been around us. And some artists have tapped into these and really dug in and used them, whether they were describing them, and passing along that information as these same components or not. Different people talk about things different way. Different artists talk about their art a little different way. They describe things in little different words. And, even reading kind of descriptions from different artists, from the last couple centuries, you realize that they use different words for some of the things that we're doing. And sometimes we're confused by that. And it's just our stupid verbal language that gets in the way of our visual language, So that's kind of the rugged part. So we have to kind of look at it and say, okay, what do they really mean by that? And then by kind of looking at those things and weighing them back and forth, I think we can get at a good assumption of how things go together.